Ladies and gentlemen, welcome wrestling fans worldwide to Knoxville and the Great Smoky Mountains for the Ron Fuller, Tennessee Studcast.
6 feet 9 inches tall, 265 pounds.
This historic podcast from one of the most respected and successful wrestlers and promoters will follow the footsteps of the largest and oldest wrestling family on the planet.
Listen to what I'm saying. That's right. Bring that camera in here a little bit closer.
Through 93 years and 4 generations.
The stud has arrived.
Old school or new fan, this unique broadcast will educate and captivate as Ron details decades of professional wrestling's growth with truly unforgettable stories.
I want those people out there at home to hear the stud.
Sit back and enjoy the ride with the Tennessee Stud.
The Tennessee Stud. You will learn that name. You will remember it.
And now,
the stud is here.
All right, here we go. Welcome in, everybody. David Summers, and it's another Studcast with the Tennessee Stud, Ron Fuller. It is the story of wrestling in America as told by the stud, whose family started the profession 100 years ago. So now we step back into the ring, back into time. Let's get wall to wall and treetop tall with the Tennessee Stud, Ron Fuller, hanging out in the Great Smoky Mountains of Tennessee. Hey, Ron, how's everything going this afternoon?
Oh, man, it's nice, beautiful, nice weather. We've been getting a lot of storms, but got to have that. Got to have a little rain in life, so we're getting some of that. But we got a nice little temperatures. It's certainly not humid, so I can't complain, man. It's about everything you come to the mountains for.
Yeah, exactly, because we have extreme heat, literally extreme heat, and we've got showers almost every afternoon, which we just went through a pretty good shower, thunderstorm, we'll call it that, because that's what it was. But anyway, so we kind of get the heat side. You're closer to God where you are, Ron.
I think that's it.
Hey, listen, I got to tell you, every Studcast for a while now has been a can't miss for fans because so much was happening every week in your life in August, especially 1979. So every episode I'm talking is filled with historic facts, amazing surprises. As the Knoxville War ends its third month and the Gulf Coast Territory begins a dive to disaster. So your title for this Studcast, number 312, this is number 312, leaves me with all kind of questions, and I'm sure listeners too. Tennessee shocking heel turn, Alabama's disastrous dive. That's the name of the show. So every episode now, it is for real. It's filled with historic facts, mind-boggling surprises, Ron.
Well, geez, Dave, that's such is my life in 1979, man. You know? I was always looking over my shoulder to see what was coming next. So, it's Studcast fans, that are going to get some major surprises in this one today, though. Every week the audience grows, and that's great. And I never thought I'd be saying this in 2023, but 44 years earlier, in August of 1979, my life was pretty much awful. But today, looking back, I'm kind of thankful for it because it gives me such a great story to tell.
You know, that's awesome. We're all looking forward to this one, especially. You had another great Studcast last week and was finally able to end one with a tremendous learning tree question from a gentleman who I think was from San Francisco about who influenced you more. Was it your father or your grandfather? I really loved your answer. And my question now is, how do you get started on this one? Where do we ride first?
Well, something happens in this one that many fans are probably not even aware ever happened, actually, simply because, it was never expected to happen, basically. After this wrestler had built a reputation as probably being the most feared and hated top Southeastern heel after a long 4-year run, man. So this one is, I think, a lot of fans are going to be extremely surprised about this. The really sad part was it ended much too soon. After the turn came, it didn't last very long because of one of the most difficult decisions I ever had to make in my life. We'll kind of get to some of that today. This turn is going to happen on the Knoxville card. that we'll be talking about today. We'll discuss the TV show for this big card, the results of the matches. We'll talk about the attendance for that night, like we normally do. And then we're going to ride south into the Gulf Coast territory. That was beginning, man, basically a dive. It wasn't dropping off, it was diving into disaster. And we'll talk about what the plans we're going to be looking at to save that territory down there. Mm-hmm. We'll also discuss a mobile card that very clearly points to the problems there. We'll hear about the TV show to promote that card, results of the card, and the attendances for all three of those major cities in that territory. And hopefully we'll have enough time for another learning tree question as well, man.
All right, this one definitely sounds like it's full of intrigue, Stud. I assume we're going to start in Tennessee, especially after you telling us something never expected was going to happen on the card for Friday night, August 24th, 1979. I think I got that right, in the Knoxville Coliseum. So who was on that card? Set that up for us.
Well, man, it opened with the return match from the week before, where Dean Ho and Eddie Mansfield, they had wrestled to a 20-minute time limit draw. And then they both didn't want to leave the ring. In fact, they refused to leave the ring, and they wanted to make sure that they had the chance to wrestle each other again the next week, but with a no time limit. And so actually they found Les Thatcher. They made him have Les Thatcher come down to ringside. And he said, okay, guys, I'll make sure that you have a no-time limit match and you can wrestle each other again next week. So that was the opening match. Crusher Blackwell was returning to Knoxville for the first time in more than a month. He'd been down south and steadily having matches with guys like Ox Baker. He's going to be here for 1 week on this trip. And it was like a much-needed change of pace for him, man. Because it's pretty hard to wrestle Ox Baker every night. So it was a little tough. So he was facing Alexis Smirnoff, and Smirnoff was about to become an integral part, man, of something special that is going to take place. Tony Charles was wrestling Norvell Austin in a non-title match. Toru Tanaka and the new Masked Man, the Korean Assassin, managed by Gorgeous George Jr., they were taking on Paul Orndorff and myself. So I had a chance to wrestle partners with Paul, which I really was looking forward to. Paul was really getting over, man.
Wow.
He was a great star all his life, really. And then we had a Southeastern Championship match. The champion, Mongolian Stomper, was in a return championship match for the title against the former champion, Dick Slater. Stomper had a special manager for this one, and a guy with a really distinct dislike for Slater. That was the Korean Assassin, who most people knew was Kevin Sullivan instantly, no matter whether he's wearing a mask or not, because Kevin had a pretty unique body.
Right.
So the main event was the Hair versus Loser Leave match that was agreed upon basically at the end of the main event from the week before. That was Robert. He was going to be shaving his head if he lost, and Jimmy Golden was going to be leaving Southeastern if he lost.
All right, so that's really a great six-card match. I got to ask you, though, before we move forward about Paul Orndorff. This was in 1979. How did he look back then? How did he stack up compared to what we remember? Of course, we just lost him not long ago, but, of course, a lot of folks remember him in the 80s and into the 90s in WWE in rare form. Oh, man,
he always had that great body. And we're going to talk a little bit about that actually later in the program, man.
Wow.
About Paul and how good he was, and some of the things that fans might not know about Paul.
Wow.
But you're right, he had a great body.
Yeah.
He always had a great body. And he got that from playing football.
Oh yeah,
so,
cool.
We'll be talking about dealing with Paul a great deal, and so this kind of show kind of opened up. With a bandaged up Rob, who was sitting with Les, and they watched the end of that 6-man elimination tag match, which was the night before. We just finished all the matches the night before. We're on TV the next day. Rob had gotten himself busted open, and we'll talk about how that happened. But it was in a match where Dad and Rob and I had wrestled against Jimmy Golden, Norvell Austin, and Toru Tanaka. And the video started when Norvell lost. Tanaka had already lost. Norvell was the second guy on that team to lose, and both of the guys had gone to the dressing room. Tanaka and Norvell, and then it was all three of us against Jimmy Golden by himself. So Jimmy got out of the ring and he got the microphone. And he made a challenge to us, and what he said is, if Ron, if you and Buddy will go back to the dressing room right now, he said, I want Rob by himself because, of what happened to me with my hair, and he's out there with his shower cap on with a little strap underneath his chin. And so he says, I want Rob, and then he said, I'll tell you what, though, he goes, I'm not finished then. He says, when I beat Rob, he says, then you guys, one of you can come back at a time and I'll beat all three of you. Basically. So he was talking a little trash, no doubt about that. So Dad and I, we didn't much want to do it, but Rob, because the challenge was so personally to him, and because the crowd seemed to like the response, when Jimmy said, I just want Rob by myself. So Rob said, go ahead, man. You guys go. Well, I'll do this. I don't mind this a bit, So we left the ring, went back to the dressing room. But by the time we got in the dressing room, closed the door, Austin and Tanaka came racing back to the ring, and all three of them jumped Rob. And before we knew what was going on, they already had him bloodied up. And when we got back to the ring, they ran back to the dressing room, all three of them. And then Golden refused to come back to the ring. So basically, what's the referee going to do? He counted him out, man, and he raised our hands. But that wasn't the end of it. So Rob wanted Les to, he's watching this video with Les, and he says, Les, we've watched this part of it. He goes, I want to show what happened now, But then Les told Rob, he said, Rob, he goes, this is pretty odd, but, he said, Jimmy Golden and Norvell Austin have gotten in touch with Don Curtis, and they have demanded that we let them show that particular piece of video from that match. So then he said they also demanded that no one announced the main event for this upcoming card, until Golden and Austin show what happened next, and they wanted to do that, and they're going to do it. He said they also asked if they could be in the personality profile today. So he said, then he goes, and they made another, demand, basically. He said, Jimmy Golden wanted to have Norvell Austin in his corner for this match, Rob, with you, for the hair against him as losing, leaving town. Mm-hmm. And he said, but, and he wants to have Norvell in his corner, but he doesn't want you to have anybody in your corner. Nobody at all.
Okay, so that's a lot of demands that are being laid out there, Ron. So Robert was totally backed into a corner, I guess you could say. He must have wanted Golden gone very badly. That match, if it happened, was really going to kind of change everything, right?
Oh, yeah. Well, you're certainly right about that. It certainly was, man. A lot of demands, too, had been made there, but that match was so important to the both of them at this point. Jimmy losing his hair really got him, man. I mean, it drove him nuts. So Les had the complete contract there. And it had already been drawn up. He had it with him at the set for Rob to sign. And, Rob knew the deal that he was going to have to go to the ring by himself, and Norvell was going to be standing in Jimmy Golden's corner, but he didn't hesitate, And then when he finished signing, he told Les, he said, the talking and the demands are all done now, man. And he goes, all that matters now, man, is who's going to win, right?
Yep.
So the studio popped, and Rob got up. He was dressed to wrestle. He was in the first match, and he went to the ring, boy, and he got a big pop. Fans were really into it.
All right, so it sounds like the TV was off to a great start, and I'll bet no one was leaving their TV sets until that personality profile was over.
Well, man, on all Knoxville TV shows, when you consistently getting an 80% share of the entire audience watching TV during the hour that Southeastern was on, it was pretty much assured no one turned off their wrestling till the show was over, basically. And if they did on this TV, they missed the next tremendous tag match that came on right after this match with Rob, because Paul Orndorff joined me, and we wrestled right there on television in the very next match. Tanaka and the Korean assassin and his manager, Gorgeous George Jr., they all went with Les to the set, and they made some comments while we wrestled. Then it was time for the special personality profile. Jimmy Golden with his bathing suit cap on his bald head, and Norvell Austin, they joined Les at the profile set. And then when fans saw the two of them there, basically they exploded. Jimmy had a lot of heat, man. It was ridiculous. So, Golden got it right, saying that he was glad that everyone had done exactly what he wanted to this point. And if everything went as he and Norvell wanted fans, everything went like they wanted to, him and Norvell, that all these fans were going to get a real treat. They're going to see Robert Fuller with a bald head real soon. So then Les asked the director to roll that final piece of video that Rob couldn't watch with him because these guys had made Don Curtis commit to letting them run it. And it was from the six-man tag match from the night before, and it opened with Robert. He was dragging Golden into the ring for their one-on-one encounter. But that didn't last too long because obviously, like I said, Norvell and Tanaka, they came sprinting down the ring, and all three of them quickly, man, they busted him up and had him bleeding pretty bad, laying on the mat. And when Dad and I got back in the ring, all three of them disappeared, obviously into the dressing room, returned to the ring, and refused to come back. Golden was counted out. They raised our hand. It seemed like the night was over, but Rob was mad. He was upset, especially at Golden now, because Golden said, basically you send your dad and Ron back to the dressing room, and I'll take you on by myself. And then they end up jumping him. So, so Golden came, Rob got on the microphone, and he said, I got a challenge for you, Golden. Come outside. He said, you got the guts to come to the ring, but come out here so I can see your face. So Golden came about halfway down to the ring, and he stopped. And Rob said, he wanted to end this for good between me and you, man. And he goes, I want to have a loser leave Southeastern match next week with you, Jimmy Golden.
Wow.
And the crowd exploded.
Wow.
Right? Hey, they were all into that, man. They didn't get to see what they thought they were going to get to see. And then so Jimmy, still back by his dressing room, he made Phil Rainey, who was he was a commentator with Les on the TV, but he also announced the matches every week. So he made Phil Rainey bring the microphone back to where he could say something. And he said he was willing to do the loser leave Southeastern. He said, I'll do the loser leave Southeastern, Robert, if I lose. But he goes, if you lose, though, I don't want you to leave Southeastern. He said, I want you to shave your head just like I did. So Rainey brought the microphone back to Rob. And Rob said, what, Jimmy Golden, you got a deal. So that was a very historic match, man. I'd never seen one of those where one guy's hair's up and the other guy's got to leave the territory if he loses. So the video was over at that point, and Golden reminded Les that Norvell was allowed to be his manager and in his corner with nobody there in Rob's corner. And then Les said that's correct, and he passed him the same contract that Rob had signed just early part of the program for Jimmy's signature. And bang, Jimmy signed her right away, and one of the most important matches in Southeastern wrestling history was going to take place 6 days later.
Wow. Okay. So another tremendous personality profile. That's how you do it right there. A historic match between two cousins, no less, was going to affect the future of Southeastern Knoxville. So who did you put in the ring? Who was in the ring next?
Well, Jimmy Golden went to the ring with Norvell Austin, standing in his corner for his TV match. He liked that. It looked like he had to have Norvell with him wherever he went at that point, I guess. In the last match of the TV, Jimmy obviously got himself a big win, and the fans they roared because he kept having to adjust his bathing suit his cap. So they all got on him big time. So the last match of the TV was based upon this running battle between the new Southeastern champion, Mongolian Stomper, and the former champion, Dick Slater. And they had faced each other, and I get to looking back in 5 out of the last 8 weeks before this night that was coming up. So they had each other, a lot of each other. They'd seen a bunch of each other. Dick Slater got a great welcome in the last match of the show, and he wrestled against Eddie Mansfield. Pretty good opponent. Gigi and the Korean Assassin, they joined Les at the set, so Gigi could kind of explain why he was going to allow the Korean Assassin to replace him the following Friday night, and he was going to let the Assassin go to the ring and manage the Stomper, which he had never done before with anybody. And he explained kind of the reason for it. The Assassin here, he really just doesn't like Dick Slater. Well, obviously he didn't, because he had lost the loser to leave. He shouldn't even have been there. So they weren't there very long before Dick Slater hit Mansfield, man, with one of those famous right hands that Slater was famous for. He knocked Eddie Mansfield into next week, man. I mean, wow. So I was like, God, he ain't getting up. Well, he sure wasn't. And then when Slater covered him for the win, the Korean Assassin, there was Sullivan sitting there at the set with Les and Gigi. Here he came running, man. He jumped up on the apron. He was going to come in and stop Slater from getting the 3 count. And as soon as he jumped on the apron, Slater got up and he hit him with one of those right hands. And when he did, it knocked him backwards off this apron of the ring, and he slid halfway across the studio, almost up to the set where Les and Gigi on his back. He was laying there too now. So a couple guys laying around when so basically the TV show ended up with 2 big right hands.
Right. Okay. That's a pretty good TV show, it sounds like to me. So I can't wait to hear what happened in a lot of those upcoming matches. And I'm really curious about the shocking heel turn that you mentioned in the title of this episode. I'm assuming that's going to be happening. So let's talk about Friday night, August 24th, 1979, in the famous Knoxville Coliseum.
Well, it was as we talked about, Dean Ho and Eddie Mansfield, they had got this agreement from the week before that they were going to have a no time limit match, and so that's exactly what happened. And this one was won by Dean Ho, at just about the 30-minute mark, but they went past the 20-minute mark, and Ho got the victory. Crusher Blackwell lost his match against Alexis Smirnoff. Tony Charles had regained his United States Junior belt from Norvell Austin on August the 10th, 1979. Norvell wanted a shot at it again, obviously, but Charles said that in order to get another shot with me, you're going to have to beat me in a non-title match. So Norvell did just that on that night. He won his match over Tony Charles, and he was going to be able to wrestle him now again for a chance to win the U.S. belt from him again. Paul Orndorff and I won our tag match over Tanaka and the Korean Assassin, managed by Gorgeous George Jr., obviously. Orndorff stole the show, man, with a move at the end of it that he had never done. I'd never seen him do since he'd been in Tennessee. And Paul, and you mentioned Paul and what he looked like and all that. Paul Orndorff had been recruited by Eddie Graham in the Florida Territory, and Eddie was recruiting these wrestlers, these amateur athletes that were great stars. He had brought in Bob Roop because he was an Olympic wrestler, and Paul Orndorff was a star football player for the University of Tampa, big time, man. So on this night, in the end of this match, Paul Orndorff hit the Korean assassin with a football tackle that he basically hit him right in the waist. He bent over, grabbed him up and jerked him up in the air, ran him across the ring and drove him into the ring corner. So hard that the entire ring moved at least a foot.
Oh, wow. Wow.
I've never seen that happen, right? And the Korean man, he wasn't just beaten, he was almost assassinated.
Wow. Wow.
His name was the Korean assassin, and he almost got assassinated. So,
wow. Listen, a lot of us have heard about Paul Orndorff, especially when he was still in college. The first time I saw him wrestle on TV in Alabama, he hit his opponent with one of those tackles that I can only imagine how bad that would have hurt. So when is this heel turn going to happen, Stud?
Well, the next match on the card was the Southeastern champion, Mongolian Stomper, defending against the former champion, Dick Slater. And for the first time ever, the Stomper was not going to be managed by Gorgeous George Jr., but by the Korean assassin. And so that a lot of that had to do with the problem that between the Korean assassin and with Slater.
All right, so why would Gorgeous George Jr. want to let the Korean assassin manage his Southeastern champion, the Mongolian Stomper, in such an important, a big-time match?
Well, remember, Dave, 2 weeks earlier, Dick Slater beat Kevin Sullivan in the loser-leave Southeastern match. Then the next day on TV, Gorgeous George Jr. introduced this new Oriental mass wrestler named the Korean Assassin, who almost everybody knew instantly was Kevin Sullivan. Like I said, man, Kevin had a very unique body. He could wear any kind of mask he wanted, but nobody's going to hide who he is. So the Korean Assassin had the best reason ever to get even with Slater, and now a huge mistake was made by Gorgeous George Jr. Really a huge mistake, to allow his champion to be managed by basically a stranger. Kevin didn't know nothing about managing the match, so it was going to come back to haunt Gigi and forever. So toward the end of that match, the referee got knocked down accidentally, and then Stomper got a full Nelson on Slater, and he took him over to where the Korean Assassin was, and the Korean Assassin jumped up on the apron to hit Slater, and then rather than hit him, he threw a chop. And I don't know where Kevin got the idea of a judo chop, but for whatever reason, Slater ducked. And when he did, Kevin cracked the Stomper man with the judo chop in the throat. Then Slater went down on top of him right there, but the referee had his back turned. He was actually still on his stomach. So the assassin there, Kevin, quickly climbed up on the top rope, and he jumped off in Slater's back, supposedly. But Slater saw him coming, and he moved. So now Sullivan knee-dropped Stomper in the throat. He chopped him, and now he knee-dropped him in the throat. So Slater drop-kicked the assassin off from the ring, and then he covered the Stomper for the win, right? So Slater's hand got raised, man, to the delight of the fans, and Dick quickly grabbed the belt, and he left the ring. Well, the Stomper, he was pretty upset, right? Gigi had never jumped off in his throat and done anything like that to him. So the Stomper was more angry than I'd ever seen him. He started into the Korean assassin's rear end, man, and I'm telling you, wow, it was unbelievable. He was just, he was destroying him. The crowd loved it, right? There's two heels fighting each other, right? So then the referee tried to stop him, but Stomper grabbed the ref. He threw him over the top rope and out on the concrete. And he went back to kicking Kevin's butt, right? And so then Toru Tanaka came to the ring, right? And the Stomper didn't see him coming, and the Tanaka attacked Stomper from behind. And gosh, the Stomper was just out of control, man. He turned and he went into Tanaka, man. The crowd got even louder. They were like, geez. Then Alexis Smirnoff comes down to the ring, and he took his shot at trying to get control of the Stomper. But the Mongol was on a roll, man, at that point, and there was no stopping him. Then another referee came to the ring and exited the same way as the first one. Stomper grabbed him and threw him over the top rope and out of the ring. So, at this point, Gorgeous George Jr.'s men are just spread laying all over the ring, and Stomper's just running the ropes and stomping them. And so Gigi finally arrived at the ring, and I don't think Gigi realized how angry his big paycheck was. And that's what I want to call Stomper. He was Gigi's paycheck, right?
Yeah, right.
And he figured, I'm going to straighten this out. And he just walked straight up to Stomper thinking that he was going to stop. And boy, he found out he was dead wrong. The Stomper had saved his best for last, man. He went wild on Gigi, and more than any of us.
Wow.
And the building exploded at that point. I mean, he's got a ring full of heels, and he's just killing them all. And he fired Gigi into the ropes. He kicked him in the stomach. Then he started running to the ropes and coming back and stomping him in the head and the face. And so finally, Gigi, now everybody in the Coliseum at that point was on their feet. They were going nuts because the Stomper was going nuts. And the Stomper dropped down on top of Gigi, who was bleeding at that point, and he started just choking him. So that obviously gave him these three heels that were in there with him the opportunity to get him stopped. And they got him on top, and they finally got him stopped. And when they got him stopped, boy, they all went to work on the Stomper at that point. Soon Stomper, man, he was a bloody mess like Gigi was. And the fans had gone from roaring to silence, and then they started looking at the back of the Coliseum to see, who's going to come and stop this, right? So Dick Slater had stopped just inside the big black curtain that he went through when he had won the belt. Mm-hmm. And I guess he heard this stuff started, and he stopped and he kind of watched. And so he started back to the ring. And he was the only guy to come down. Gigi's men, baby, they basically finished with the Stomper. I mean, Stomper was laying there, and they had really done a job on him. And they were trying to get the bloody Gigi out of the ring, and they carried him on their shoulders back to the dressing room. The Stomper was out. He was unconscious.
Wow.
He had to be stretchered out of the ring. And when they put him on the stretcher and they started stretching him out of the ring, and Slater's kind of walking beside the stretcher, he got a standing ovation from the fans. And I mean, I hadn't heard an ovation like that in a really long time in Knoxville.
Wow.
And then he was later. He was put in an ambulance, and they sent him to the hospital. Man, one of those hospitals that I visited myself quite a bit, real close to the Coliseum. So I kind of knew what that ride was about.
That is a wild ending and probably a wild ride for the Stomper and shocking finish to a match. I certainly didn't expect the Mongolian Stomper to be the crowd's hero before the night was over. So what happened in the hair versus loser leaves match in the main event? I can't believe you would have a bigger match than what you just talked about.
Yeah, I mean, how do you follow that? But
Right.
they did. I mean, Rob and Jimmy went out there, and my knee was unbelievable. Norvell ended up getting involved in the match, like pretty much everybody would have suspected. But Rob lost, and they shaved Jimmy Golden and Norvell Austin. They were right there to hold him down, and they shaved Rob's head just like Jimmy's was.
Wow. Okay, so everybody got the bang for their buck. That's an absolutely fantastic night of surprises, almost from beginning to end. So what about attendance? How'd you guys do on that?
Well, a card like this one, man, before the war started, and this was the last week in the summer, which was the end of the best period of time in the year for wrestling, that crowd would have been well over 5,000. Maybe a total sellout, man. What a card it was. But instead, it barely broke 4,000, man. And even at that low level, it was the best crowd of the summer. But for me, gosh, I got to say, Dave, it was a huge disappointment, man. I was really thinking something, I don't care if we're having a war or not, somewhere, some night, something is going to happen that we're going to get back to those big 5,000 plus crowds.
Wow.
Didn't
Okay.
happen.
All right, Ron, a great first part on this one. So when we come back, it may be to an even bigger disappointment down south when this Studcast continues. Okay, and Stud, on the break, you mentioned earlier you had something to say specifically on the break about a new Ask the Stud that's debuting on YouTube. Tell us what's happening.
Yeah, and I really love these shows, Dave, and I kind of wanted to say something myself personally about this one. This is going to be the 8th one of these. Wow, they're just a tremendous number of fans, just crazy about them. And this one, I got to be honest, each one of them always freaks me out about how good the questions are. But this may be the best one so far. It's going to be the 8th one, Ask the Stud. It's an exclusive thing that you can only see on YouTube. It will be happening on this coming Saturday night, which is going to be August the 19th. And it's I haven't recorded it yet, but I have the idea from just speaking to the guy that handles the recordings for me. He says these questions are tremendous, Ron. You're going to love this one. So, I really enjoy doing these things. I just want to make fans aware that this is going to be the 8th Ask the Stud. You can go to YouTube, Southeastern Rewind, subscribe if you're not already subscribed there, and you'll be able to hear this for free. Usually these things run at least an hour, sometimes as much as like an hour 10, possibly. So, wow, I really, really enjoy doing them. Fans are really, really complimentary after they're listened to them. This one's got some of the greatest questions. So I just want to make everybody aware this Saturday, August the 19th, you can go to Southeastern Rewind on YouTube, and you can hear this 8th one of these Ask the Studs.
All right, welcome back on the Studcast. And listen, I would have loved to see that Mongolian Stomper match. It was something like I probably have never seen before. I've seen a lot of wrestling matches. I can't wait to hear next week how that entire thing goes from here. All right, speaking of hearing how things go, we're now in southeastern Gulf Coast, Ron, and things, according to the title of this episode, are about to take a disastrous dive in attendance. And I'm talking literally only weeks after it was like everything was golden. So not Jimmy Golden, but going really well. All right, so we're going back to Pensacola, where we were last week. Andre the Giant faced the dangerous Ox Baker in front of a rare, at this point, sold out Gulf Coast building. Yeah,
so what was on the card for Tuesday, the 21st of 1979, was just 3 days before the Knoxville card that we already talked about in the first part of this podcast.
Yeah.
So we're back in Pensacola, like you have said. There's a different card here this time, obviously, than the Andre. Andre's a pretty special thing. So this card on the Tuesday night, August the 21st, 79, opened up with Roy Lee Welch taking on Ted Oates, who was a young wrestler. He had a brother that was a great wrestler, too, both of them out of Columbus, Georgia. Ron Slinker was facing the Inferno. Herb Calvert was taking on Crusher Blackwell. The day before, Blackwell was going to leave to go to Tennessee for a week's vacation. So, the wrestling pro, and he needed that vacation. The wrestling pro, Tarzan Baxter, wrestled against Ox Baker. And the Samoans were getting another chance at the Southeastern Tag Belts of the Champion Assassins. This time, that match was going to be a no disqualification match. The main event was a special challenge handicap match. The Southeastern champion, Austin Idol, agreed to defend his belt. This is pretty odd. And he was going to wrestle both gladiators if they tagged in and out as a team. And Idol only did it because he said if he won the match, then he would never have to defend against either of those guys again. And if he lost the match, that the gladiator that secured the win over him was going to get a championship match the following week.
All right, so really not a bad card at all, Ron. I've never heard of that kind of a handicap match, though, with those kind of stipulations. But it would be interesting. So my question, I know the original gladiator was Dick Steinborn. So who was the other gladiator?
Well, he was none other than Louis Tillett.
All right, wait. You mean Louis Tillett, the booker. So he was a former wrestler, I'm assuming, obviously. And why would a booker put himself in the ring unless it was an absolute necessity?
Well, that's a good question, Dave. Louis was a good worker, but now he'd become a desperate booker.
All right, good answer, Stud. All right, I get it. So what about the TV to promote this card? Set that up for us.
Well, one of the gladiators, Dick Steinborn, joined Charlie Platt at the set while his partner, Louis Tillett, took on an opponent in the ring in the opening match. Steinborn covered all the possibilities in this upcoming handicap match against the hot heel in that territory down there, Austin Idol, who was the current Southeastern champion. The second gladiator, Tillett, won with the same hold that his partner used regularly, with a sleeper hold. So the Samoans made a now at this point a rare TV appearance in preparation for their upcoming Southeastern Tag Championship match with the champion Assassins. Charlie said they were, man, as impressive as they always were. And these guys were really, really good. And he said after, just like that, and all the other times that they'd wrestle on TV, they were extra stiff on television. And both of the guys they wrestled had to be helped out of the ring when it was over. Wasn't uncommon for those boys to put a little pain on people. They couldn't help it. Wow.
All right. So how about the personality profile? Who was on that?
Well, man, this was going to be the best segment of this show because after talking to Charlie and I listened to what happened down there, you know, I thought, wow, that had to be one of tremendous profile. So it had Ox Baker and the Southeastern Tag Champion Assassins on with Charlie. And it also had a video of that recent match with Andre against Ox Baker from Pensacola, Florida, the week before this card that we just talked about. And in that match, the Assassins came to the ring to help their friend Ox Baker. And, you know, if you were wrestling Andre, you needed help, especially if you were by yourself. So, you know, here they came down to get involved in Ox Baker and Andre's match. And then the most dangerous moments of that entire match happened at this point because the Assassins and the Ox kind of got Andre down, and the Assassins got Andre's arms behind his back, and Ox Baker, man, had that taped fist, and boy, he loaded up that fist, and he got a clean shot at Andre's heart, and with that heart punch. It was so scary that Charlie said the fans in the studio bleachers, when they watched this video and they saw him hit him with that heart punch, that the fans in the bleachers were sitting right next to the profile area where they were doing this. He said they all started this. They were just screaming, man. They were like, wow, they all screamed out loud. Andre dropped face first on the mat as soon as he was hit. Wow. They were still buzzing about what was going on as the video showed the Giant being helped back to the dressing room by the big Samoans.
Wow.
So the three of them then took the end of the profile to tear into their opponents. And, you know, they had already seen this, you know, what they had done to Andre. And so the Assassins started out, and they laughed about the sad Samoans, they call them, that they had just wrestled in the TV match earlier in the day, and, you know, that they beat somebody that did know how to wrestle, and it wasn't going to happen with them, that the Samoans had no chance of beating them, and that the Samoans had lost so many times to them already that every time they wrestled them now, they said the Samoans would be crying coming to the ring. So Ox, he just roared with laughter at that one, man, you know, and then the Assassins, just to make more fun of the Samoans, they started wiping these fake tears from their eyes like this. Ox, they were crying like this, right? So, you know, and Charlie's telling me about it, and I was like, I could picture it. I was going, wow, this is pretty good. So Ox then finished the profile off, and he asked Charlie, he said, you know, he says, is it true that this so-called famous wrestling pro, that's who he's going to be wrestling, in Pensacola. He says, "Is it true that this famous wrestling pro, who's going to be wrestling out here in the next TV match, by the way, he knew it, he says, that he's from this part of the country?" And Charlie answered, very proudly. He goes, "Absolutely, the pros certainly is. He's a product of the wiregrass, man." And so then Charlie said, "Ox, then," he asked me another question. He goes, "Charlie," he goes, "how good are the heart doctors here?"
Oh, no.
Charlie said, I didn't know where he was going with this. Because he said, but he said, I had to go along. So he said, yeah. He said, I told him, I think they're some of the best. Why? We asked Ox why. And Ox says, he goes, because, Charlie says, I'm going to go back to the dressing room and I'm going to tape my fist and I'm going to give the old pro in that next match a little taste of what's coming this week in these matches, all of them against me.
Wow.
And then he said, I'm talking about him taking a little ride today to the nearest wiregrass with a fire ass to the hospital. Charlie said,
wow.
Oh, he said, I don't know what to do, Ronnie. It's like, wow, of course. What is things are going pretty far out, man, in this profile.
All right, so Ox Baker actually got away with saying that on TV. Did he?
They don't believe it. They're not prepared for that.
Right.
In the live show, the live broadcast. So they don't bleep out that one word. So
yeah.
Ox had himself fun, right?
Wow, for real. All right, so did he do anything during that next match with used to be my hero, it still is, the late wrestling pro?
Well, I asked Charlie that same question, about what did he do, Charlie? Did he go to the dressing room? Did he tape his fist up and the whole deal? And he said, well, Ron, he said, first of all, he said, pro heard that. And, he said he's sitting back there in his dressing room. They got a monitor, and he said he couldn't hardly wrestle for looking at the dressing room door where Ox was in the dressing room, right? So Charlie said that Ox came out toward the end of the match. He had taped his fist, and he said he stood right there beside the ring, man, and he pounded his fist, he said, into his hand. And he had that nasty look on his face, man, the look he was famous for. So Charlie said the pro put his opponent to sleep, and you're going to love this part of it, Charlie said the pro put his opponent to sleep, and then he said he walked over to the ropes where Ox was standing still there, pounding his fist, and he said he put a foot on the bottom one, and he put a hand on the second rope, and he lifted them apart, spread them wide, and he said, come on in, Ox.
That's some pretty good guts right there when you're talking to a man that's that big. I always admired Leon Baxter. Always thought he was so cool. But that story makes my day, Stud. So I don't know how Ox Baker could get away with getting any more heat, how that would be possible than what he's doing right now without laying his hands on somebody. That's amazing. So how did the TV show end?
Well, it ended up with Austin Idol, man, in a very unusual handicap match on TV. A handicap match was usual enough, but you certainly never had one normally on TV. And they had two opponents in the handicap match, and they tagged in and out. But Charlie said it didn't last long, man. The match, he said it didn't take long till he said Idol got the figure four on the first one of those two guys, and obviously the guy gave up. So basically, he said the match was officially over, and Idol got his hand raised. But then he said the second guy in there that hadn't been in the hold, he said he was trying to help the guy out of the ring because the guy couldn't walk. He couldn't, that figure four is a great hold.
Yeah.
And he said Idol sneaked up behind him and pulled him into the ring and put the figure four on him and wouldn't let it go. He said both the gladiators finally had to come running into the ring, and Idol let him go, and he left at that point. But Heidel was getting some heat too at that time.
Oh, no doubt. All right, a really good TV show, it sounds like. So considering the Pensacola card only had 5 matches, so how about 3 days later, August 21st, 1979?
Well, Roy Lee Welch beat Ted Oates. Ron Slinker won over the Inferno. Crusher Blackwell got a win over Herb Calvert. He left the next day, went down there, and that's where he's going to end up wrestling in Knoxville on the card we just talked about. The Southeastern Tag Championship match ended up a no contest. The Samoans were just about to beat the Assassins. And this time, instead of the Assassins coming down to help Ox ends up going and getting involved in their match. And that led to Crusher Blackwell joining the fight. And that match was declared a no contest, ended up a big brawl, and it was going to be coming back the next week as a 6-man elimination tag. Austin Idol couldn't beat both the Gladiators, and so he actually got himself disqualified because it appeared that they were going to get a pinfall on him, and he didn't want to lose that way. So the Gladiators got their hands raised, and that was enough for Idol to have to defend his Southeastern belt the next week against one of the 2 Gladiators. And I'm sure, that was going to be probably Dick Steinborn that was going to take that match.
Wow. Okay, so what about attendance? All 3 major cities that week. How'd you guys do?
Man, this the title of this episode comes from these figures right here. I mean, Montgomery dropped from 2,300 down to 1,900. It was the first time Montgomery had been below 2,000 fans since May of 1979. Mobile fell from 2,900 to 2,500. Dothan followed suit. It went from 2,500 down to 2,100. And let's add Pensacola to this one rather than just the 3 major cities. Let's give the Pensacola total too, since it was last week. Pensacola had the biggest crowd in the territory because Andre was on that card. It had 5,100 fans last week, and this week it only had 2,600. So,
wow.
So as a territory, Dave, these 4 cities dropped from 12,800 fans down to 9,100. That's a loss of 3,700 fans in 1 week. That's almost 33% loss in revenue in 1 week.
Wow.
That's why I called it a disaster. I mean, and we're still, it was almost the last week of summer and the fall. Worst time of the year was straight ahead for us.
I'll tell you, this Studcast, as usual, has been a real experience, Ron. Your brother now had a bald head, as well as your cousin Jimmy, maybe the last wrestler you would ever think of as a babyface. The Mongolian Stomper had set the Coliseum crowd on fire. Ox Baker was definitely pushing the limits of, shall we say, decency, and the Gulf Coast attendees' numbers were dropping like rain in a hurricane. So I don't know how your 1979 is going to get any worse, but we got some good news, Stud. We're going to have time for another learning tree question. Let's do it. This one comes from Andrew Boykin, Calgary, Alberta, Canada. Andrew says, love your Studcast and your new When Wrestling Was Wrestling post that you do on your social media site. Your last one was a photo and story of you and your brother from 1970. I saw that, by the way, when you both were just starting in the sport. My question is, how did it feel in the ring that night to be doing what your family had done since your grandfather's day in the early 1920s?
Wow. What a great question, man. And another fan from Canada, Dave, it never ceases to amaze me, man. We're worldwide, man. It's pretty crazy. So Mr. Boykin, I think that was his name, last name, Boykin, Mr. Boykin. Somebody had posted that picture of Rob and I, and I saw it, and it brought back instant memories of that night. And now And here I am now, I get a question about it. So, and you saw it as well. It was a great picture. It was me and my brother. Wow, we look like teenagers, like we shouldn't be in the ring, that's for sure.
Yeah.
So, and I'm very happy to be able to explain, Mr. Boykin, how it had made me feel, It was what I had dreamed of all my life. I was basically born to be a wrestler, man, and it started. And that started, Dave, when I was 9 days old. My grandmother literally carried me to my first wrestling match with my grandfather wrestling with two of his three brothers that were all wrestlers, Herb and Lester. And they were in a 2 out of 3 fall 6-man tag match. And sorry, Mr. Boykin, at 9 days old, I don't remember any of it, not even who won. But I was at a wrestling match when I was 9 days old. So growing up, wrestling was all I ever knew, man. And then when the entire family got together, which was very seldom, it was like an entire territory full of wrestlers and bookers and referees and promoters and the guys at the top were the owners of the business. I mean, no family in history ever had more members involved in the wrestling business. So, sometimes the family get-togethers didn't stay real calm. So you never knew what to expect when everybody got together. But that picture of Rob and I was 22 years old in that picture. Rob was 21, and it was like a tribute to those before us that had put on their wool wrestling tights. Back in the day, that's what they wore, were wool wrestling tights, man. 50 years earlier, my granddad and Herb and Lester and Jack and that first generation, all they knew what wool wrestling tights were all about. And I'm pretty sure Rob and I were looking across the ring that night at two of the best wrestlers that ever lived, man. The original Masked Assassins. And that was they were the Georgia Tag Team Champions, Jody Hamilton and Tom Ernesto. Those two big son of a guns weighed almost 600 pounds. There I was, me and my brother, man, white meat. I guess it'd be a good thing to call us. We were lucky to get to 450 pounds, much less 600. And Mr. Boykin, you asked how I felt that night. I had goosebumps, man. Standing there in that picture, I remember, and being introduced in front of 8,000 fans in the downtown Atlanta's Municipal Auditorium. Wow, that building had seen it all, man. They had events from the World Boxing Championship matches to the debut of the classic Gone with the Wind movie in 1939. Wow. In that building. It had seen it all, man. And so my brother and I, we didn't win that night. And we learned an awful lot about how to lose. We were in a business that was going to require a lot of losses before you could be good enough to become a winner. And we worked our way up just like all the greats before us. 5 years after that photo was taken, I owned my first wrestling company. And that same assassin, Jody Hamilton, that had taught my brother and I a whole lot in the summer of 1970, he was now working for me and with me in Southeastern. He was going to work with me for the next 13 years until 1988. That photograph from 1970, Mr. Boykin, it sent chills up and down my spine when I saw it. I hadn't seen it in so long. And it represented in 2023 all that my entire family had given of themselves for the last 100 years in the ring.
Wow. That was a pretty sincere answer straight away, Ron, to a great question. So you're always doing something different on your social media sites these days. You're new when wrestling was Wrestling Post, and I've noticed those. Really describe memorable moments in your personal wrestling history. This one today that you so eloquently just explained is a perfect example of that. You're becoming a true historian for the sport. So where do we ride next week?
Well, we're riding into the last days of August 1979. in both territories, actually, with the school starting back and fall of the year on its way, as bad as it had been toward the late part of the summer, especially down south and in the north as well. It wasn't doing great in Knoxville either. We still had the war going on. Truly tough times were ahead for both of the territories. Talent was soon going to be swapped from north to south in an attempt, man, to get the momentum again back. We're going to be moving guys like Blackwell back and forth, Ox Baker. A lot of guys are going to be going back and forth. We're going to take a close look at the Tennessee territory, and we're going to do it by comparing it to what happened in the same week a year earlier in 1978. And we'll do that in the next Studcast. We're going to compare the 1978 first end of August card to a 1979 and the houses, basically the houses more than the cards. We'll discuss the cards for both years, the TV that promotes the 1979 card, the results of that card, and the Knoxville attendance. And then in the Gulf Coast territory, nothing was dramatically changing on those cards. And the drop in attendance, it wasn't going to change much either. We're going to return to Mobile instead of Pensacola, where we have been for a couple of weeks. We're going to have our card there. We'll cover that TV show for the territory and that card, the results of the card and the attendances in all three of the major cities.
Wow. Okay, folks, on Facebook, go to Ron Fuller Welch, the Tennessee Stud, on Facebook. Like and follow him there. Become friends with a living legend. On Twitter, find him on Twitter. Same thing, Ron Fuller Welch. You can follow him there as well. Check out the fantastic website, tnstud.com. tnstud.com for every Studcast ever done, 43 super Studcast, and the Stud Store, all kinds of souvenirs, including Ron's thrilling lion novel called Brutus. Get yours personally autographed. Get it there as well at tnstud.com. Ron's YouTube Southeastern Rewind, still red hot. Check it out on YouTube. Put in Southeastern Rewind. It'll lead you there. It'll lead you to 320 videos, the last 89 Studcast, 52 Stud stories, and now 61 short rides with the Stud. And as we talked about earlier, don't miss the new Ask the Stud #8 question and answer show. It's coming this Saturday, August 19th, the best one yet. Subscribe now at YouTube, Southeastern Rewind, and you'll see the very best in old school wrestling. All right, Ron, it's all yours. Any last comments?
Yeah, man, I would like to thank everybody, obviously, that's been listening and riding with us for years, man. There are a lot of them, Dave. It's just amazing what goes on here, and just blown away by it. And I want to welcome, obviously, all the first-time listeners. We're getting a lot of those still. Please, everybody out there, tell your friends and neighbors about us. Take care of yourselves and others, and may God bless us all.
For Ron Fuller in the Great Smoky Mountains of Tennessee, I'm David Summers saying thank you for listening. Find me at davidsummersproductions@gmail.com. This Studcast is a David Summers production for Tennessee Stud, LLC.
Thanks for joining us today for this historic Studcast. The true story continues next week. So full Nelson your friends and point them in our direction for another ride with the Tennessee Stud.
1, 2, 3.
This is David Summers saying so long from the Great Smoky Mountains.